Hi everyone, and welcome to this tutorial series on how to create C++ plugins for Cinema 4D. Today we're just going to stick with dialogues just for a little bit longer, and the last thing I want to show is how to add what's called a user area. And a user area lets you add an image to a dialogue, and that image you can put anything in there. And later on I've got an idea for doing something which requires textures and images, and I want to put that in my own dialogue. And so that's why I'm going to show you how to do that now. I think there is an example of like a user area. If I was just to come up to window, or even if we just switch to like the body paint view, the texture view, this whole view here is kind of like a user area. And these here, all these colored bars here, they are all individually user areas. So anything where you want to put your own kind of texture and draw something in the window, you can do that using a user area. So let's just jump back to the plugin to code now. So to start with, I'm just going to see if I can find another user area that might be within here, just to see if we can get an example. I'm going to search for public user area, just to see if there's another one that's maybe been defined somewhere. I need to search entire solution, so I'll just search the entire solution for user area actually, instead of the word public. And we've got an example here which shows you how to make a gradient. We've got a layer shader browser example there. But none of them are really example user area. This is probably what I'm looking for here. It's just a very simple example actually, and we might even just copy this code exactly and just use this, just so I can show you how to add a user area, and I'll just explain what some of this stuff does. So for reference, this is going to be in Cinema 4D source GUI GE dialog underscore gadgets. So Cinema 4D source GUI GE dialog gadgets, and we've got user area. So this file is actually quite interesting for people that want to see what else can be done in a GE dialog, because that's pretty much what this entire file is. It's all about how you can add certain things to a dialog. And you can see here they've got a lot of different things. I wanted to actually show you how to do a combo box as well, but I'll save that for another tutorial when I need it. So we're going to go and find that user area. So again, I just double clicking here. So it's line 230 of this GE dialog gadgets file, this one here. Line 230 is where you'll find, that's where you'll find the reference to that. If you right click and go to definition, it's line 88 of that same file. And I'm just going to copy all of this here. So I'm copying from a user area. I'm copying this example user area all the way down to that. That's the code that we want there. Get min size and a draw message. So now I've copied that, and I'm going to go back to our plugin, which is my first plugin. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add new item. I'm going to call it my user, test user area, and I'll make a header file. And then I'm also going to add a CPP file, test user area .cpp. Now I've added these to the wrong location, so I'm just going to fix that up now and go to these actual source code, f/code, c/code, SDK, plugins, first plugin. So when I save those files, they got saved into here. So I saved them to the wrong spot. So if you followed along my tutorial there, you'll notice I put them in the wrong place. So I'm just cutting those out of there and putting them back in the source folder. So all of these files should live in the source folder. And you could actually create these files just on disk yourself by right clicking and going new text document. In fact, I'm going to show you how to do that now as well. So I'm going to actually click delete on there and remove them from there. And by clicking remove there, it doesn't delete them on disk, but I'm just going to delete them here as well. I could have selected delete over there. So now these don't exist for this project. So I'm going to do this manually here this way as well. I'm going to say test user area .h, and then I'm going to copy and paste that, and then just rename it to .cpp. So now we've got those two files there. So they're on disk, but they're not in here. And now I'm going to run that project tool, bat file that we created, this one here in one of the first tutorials. And when I run that, it recreates this project file. As you can see here, it's recreated the project file for it. And now if I close that down and I'm going back into Visual Studio, it's going to say that it's been modified outside of this environment. I actually just want to discard these changes because anything that I did in here doesn't matter, because I did just add it there, but we don't need it. I'm going to click discard. And you'll see now those two files are added back in. So it's actually found those files on disk and it's added them in. There's a bit of a long-winded tutorial there on just how to create files, but I think it's well worth knowing how to add files to there using that project tool to build them. So now again, we're copying this text from this code from here, from that GE Dialog gadgets file. I'm going into the CPP file. I'm just going to paste that in, and I'm going to remove the top bit. So I'm going to cut that out, leaving this in here. I go to the header file and paste that in, and I'm going to rename this because I've called my test. I'm going to rename that to test, and I'm going to save that. And at the top, I'm going to go hash include c4d.h, and at the top of this I'm also going to go hash if not defined test user area, then hash define, I don't need the brackets there, hash define, and I'll put that in. Oh, sorry about this. There we go. And then I'm going to go end if at the end here. And that should be c4d.h. And now everything resolves there. It's discovered everything. And I'm going to copy that test area, go back to our CPP file, replace those two at the front there. And now at the top of this file, hash include test user area. And save that. And everything should resolve itself there as well after a little bit of time. So now we've got a test user area, and if we want, we can compile that to make sure it compiles. Again, if you haven't watched any of my previous tutorials, what I did there, I've explained this in one of the earlier tutorials. It's just to stop C++ from including this information repetitively. You'd have to go back to one of my earlier tutorials to understand that. I won't go into it here, but just follow along and you'll be fine. You don't really need to know exactly how things are happening. You just follow along and kind of have a fun experience while you're doing it. So now we compiled that, and that file compiled fine. So now we want to add that to our user area, to our GE Dialog. So I'm going to copy this name. I'm going to go to our dialog, the header file. At the bottom here, type private. I'm going to paste that in and go underscore test area. So I've just added that as a member variable to my class, and we need to include the include file for this. Now I could type up here hash include test user area, or I could just right click on this, and actually it doesn't seem to happen in this. No, you can't right click on that one. Just have to come up here, go hash include, and we call it test user area, and that will allow that to be included in here. I'm going to copy that. I've just put an underscore there just to signify that it's a member variable of this class rather than a local one in a function. I might get to that later. So I've just copied test area. I'm going to my first dialog, and at the top I'm going to again make a message, an ID for it, test area. Now I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to add it straight after my sliders. You might not even put it in a group. I'll just put it straight outside of that group. And I'll put it in this group. No, I won't. I'll put it outside the group. add user area, and I'm passing in the IDC test area, and I'm passing in the flag. I want this to scale. I want it to scale to fit in vertical and horizontal. And I want the minimum width to be, let's just say 200 by 200 as the initial width for that user area. And now you also need to attach the user area. So now I open this up, and we're going to pass in the user area that we created, which we called, I've forgotten what we called it, just test area. We pass that in, and then we pass in the ID as well. So I'm passing in the ID there. And if we wanted to, we could pass some additional data, but we won't. We'll just leave that as it is. And that should be all we need. And we'll just see if this works. If not, I'll put it inside of a group. And so I'm just going to press F5 now and run this. So I'm just doing this in real time, letting Cinema 4D start up so you can see and follow along. And here you can see we've got a big white square, and this is a GE user area written in it. So let's just have a look now at what all that means and how that got in there. So we're going to go over to our user area, and we can see here that, well, initially it wants a minimum size of 400 by 300. So even though in the dialog here we said 200 by 200, it's made itself bigger to at least be this size. So let's push those other groups up a bit, and that's why we had all that space underneath. And it's called this on screen, and what that allows it to do, it says it there in the description. What it does is when it starts drawing things into this area, now you can think of this user area as just like a blank canvas, like an image. And as it draws into there, if it was doing that directly on screen, it would possibly flash a little bit as it's being drawn, potentially, depending on the refresh rate and a few other things. But what this off-screen on thing does is it will draw in the background on a copy of the area, and when it's finished it will flip it back into view, so the whole thing gets drawn at once rather than potentially drawing all these things one after the other. Now it comes into this draw message with the size that it's wanting to actually draw, or the area of the UI in Cinema 4D that it wants to draw. And this just allows you to ensure that when you do any following calls, it's going to only apply to this region, because you could potentially draw outside the region. And that again says that in this method it can be used to avoid drawing outside the area by clipping it. So if your methods start trying to draw outside of the actual visual space, it won't draw in there. Now x1, y1, x2, y2, that's the coordinates of the size of the dialog, or the location on the screen where it is. And let's just have a look at that. Let's go right click, declaration. We need to go in GE user area, go to definition. So the x is the upper left coordinate, xy, so it'll be up here somewhere, and then the x2, y2 is down the bottom right. So you got a top left, or upper left, and then a lower right of the coordinates of where it wants to draw. So we just go back to that test user area. So this next part down here, it's setting a color that we want to draw, and it's taking in a vector, and by default if you just put 1 in there, it's going to default not the number 1 but 1 parameter, because a vector is takes three coordinates, an x, a y, and a z value. And normally you could pass in 1, 1, 1, and now you've set it to be at 1 on the x, 1 on the y, and 1 on the z coordinate in space. But the constructor here, you can just take a single value as well, and it'll initialize them all to that same value. Now for the pen color, you've got instead of x, y, z for this vector, you're actually using RGB values, red, green, and blue, but they're in floating space. So floating space is between 0 and 1 to define the range of the color. But in computers, in 8-bit computers, the normal range of red is 0 to 255. So to make something fully red, you'd have an int32 value of 255, and green, the green value is say 255, and 32 blue value 255, and the values that you pass into this is actually between 0 and 1. So if we wanted to use this here, and because it's passing in 1, it's saying 255, 255, 255 for everything. To make that a little bit more clearer, we're going to make a vector here called color. We're going to go color.x equals 1 divided by 255, sorry, not 1. If we go red divided by 255.0 f, or just 0.0. And I'll do the same for y and z, green, blue. So what this is doing here is it's dividing this red color up here, this value, by 255, and that's going to change this into a value, this x value. It's going to put this into the vector as a value of between 0 and 1. So if this was 128, and this was 128, then you got like 50% green, 50% blue, and full red. And then when you come in here, this red will be, this will be a value of 1, so it'll be 255 divided by 255 is 1. And this will be a value of 0.5, and this will be a value of 0.5. And now I'm going to grab that color, and I'm going to pass that into here as well. So now I'm actually going to I'll leave that like that, and then I might run it with some different values later on. And so that's set the color that we're going to be drawing into this user area. And then this next method here will draw a rectangle using that color at these coordinates. So it's going to use the exact same coordinates that passed in, so the top left and the bottom right. So you're going to get the entire square being this color that we've set up here with these RGB values. And if you wanted, you could change those to any values you want. You might draw a little square in wherever you want. And there's other methods in here that let you draw ellipses and polygons and lines, and also lets you draw images. So you can even load images off disk and just put images straight into this area as well. And lastly down here, SetText. So it lets you draw some text, and it's set a value of 0 for that text. So if RGB is going to be this value of 0, then it's going to be black. And it's saying that the background of this text is going to be a transparent color, because that's the foreground color and the background color of the text it's going to draw. And so that's different to set pen color. That's kind of for shapes. Set text color is just for text. And then it will draw that text and put it in the viewport. And there's some options for there as well if you want to right click and look at those, or just hover over it and you'll see the options there as well for that. So let's just run that now and see what that does. Now you can see our slightly red image there. And I'm just going to change this to, let's just change blue to 0. I'm going to put a breakpoint in here. I'm going to run that again. And then we'll just step through and you'll see what I mean with these values. I'm even going to put a breakpoint in the minimum size there. So the values come in at 0 and 0. And what that does then is it sets these width and height values to 400 and 300. And it's passed them back to whoever called this method. And we could actually check that later on. You can actually look at the call stack. You can see who's called it. But you don't need to worry about that. But someone's called this area and said, hey, what is the smallest size you should actually be on screen? And it's taken that value and it's returned it. I can just continue now because I've taken the breakpoint out. Now we're in the draw message. And we're getting a draw message for 0, 0, which is top left, to 514 and 300. So 300 is our height that we said we want it to be. But you see the width is bigger because in that dialog we actually asked the dialog to stretch it and in the vertical and the horizontal as much as it can. So horizontally it's stretched it a little bit more than the 400, which was the minimum that we wanted it to be. So that's why this has come in at a bigger size, because we've told the dialog that this can actually be bigger if we want it to be. And so now when we set this clip region, it's going to set it to those same boundaries. And if we just step through a little bit here, step all the way through, if I hover over color now, you're going to see that it's got a value of near 0.5 for the green and the value of 1 for the color, and the Z, which is the blue value, has got nothing either. And then it just sets the color and does everything as normal. So I'm just going to click play and let that continue. And now we've got the color here. So I think that's about it for today. If you want to experiment more, actually no, I'll continue one last thing. I will add an image here just to show how that works as well. Let's see if I can quickly do that. Actually no, I'll leave that for another tutorial, loading an image and putting it in there. I'll just leave that video as it is right now. So I went a little bit quick through this with some of these things, but that was pretty much the gist of it. That is the minimum amount you need for defining a user area. I put it in its own file because it's always nice to have a separate file for each class that you have just for management purposes. And then we added that user area to our first dialog by creating a member variable inside of the dialog. And then we added that at the end of our create layout function. We added the user area and we attached the one that we have to the ID. So this defines how it should behave in the dialog, and this just attaches the actual user area that we want to that ID as well, so the dialog knows what it is and has kind of ownership over it. There's a lot more things you can do with user areas. You can do all sorts of mouse calls, and you can draw into it, and you can get as complicated as you want to get. But this is the basics of it. This is where you start. So I hope that's enough for today, and I'll catch you again next time. Thanks.